to this morning's executive. And obviously the first item is apologies from Councillor Bissett. There's no other apologies, I understand? No. Any declarations of interest? No, none declared. Okay, thank you. We move into the minute of the executive held on the 13th of April. The minutes are on your agenda. Are we happy to agree those as a matter of accuracy?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything outstanding that somebody is seeking any information on? No. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 4, which is the rolling action log. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'm just wondering if we could possibly get an update in relation to 549, the fireworks situation. We're only 5 months away from the November, and it's a year on since we had a motion. I think it was the full council at the time regarding the fireworks situation. I know there's guidance awaited from the Scottish Government, and I fully appreciate that we're only just started into a new Parliament. But is this guidance likely to be issued and received in time for implementing this year? If not, are there measures that this council is prepared to take to try and combat the level of complaints that we've been receiving regarding the current fireworks situation? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmo. I'll ask Mr Duff to maybe give us an update on where things are with that.
Happy to do that, convener. Just as Councillor Nimmo was mentioning, the regulations have been enacted. They were enacted just prior to the recess of the previous Parliament, and they do come into force on the 30th of June, but the guidance relating to the further recommendations of the group is still awaited, and when we have that, we would intend to report to the executive. So we hope that that should come soon, now that the new Parliament is sitting, and we'll be preparing a report as soon as we have that.
Okay, thank you, Mr Duff. I think until such time as we do have the guidance, it's difficult to be able to take anything forward. But we do have, the legislative aspects there which we can look to enforce. And I know that there's been discussions already had through the portfolio holder and the service as well as the police on that. Councillor Kerr, you wanted to come in.
Thanks, convener. On page 12, biodiversity and sustainable grass management pilot. I'd asked Douglas at our meeting last night for an update, and he sent one this morning, which is great, which will happen. But informed me last night and today that elected members, community council members, and other groups have been notified of the pilot plans. When we agreed to this pilot scheme, it was an understanding that the communities would be informed. I asked at the last meeting if this could happen and get something on the website and possibly the Falkirk Herald, but it's not happened, apparently. I'm asking officers for things and we're agreeing to them, it's not happening. I don't think, convener, that I'm asking for anything that's above what we can do. I just want the communities to know what we're intending. Some of my group have already been getting emails saying why we're not cutting the grass in some of the areas. And it's people's perception that we're not cutting them because we're having cuts, and that's why we're not cutting the grass, which is further from the truth. convener, as everybody on this meeting knows. So we are all happy that this is happening, but we just need the communities to know. It was supposed to be done before the pilot scheme started, and I know there have been difficulties. But if we're saying that we're going to communicate to all the communities, that's what needs to happen.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Douglas, what more can we do around the comms in this? I know we were limited and the portfolio holder was limited during PURDA about what they could put out and do, but what can we do particularly through our social media that would maybe enable a bit more information to go out to the communities?
Yeah, we're attending to it as promptly as we can, Councillor, and so we've got, as I said, and Councillor Kerr has referred to, we have written out to all members, community councils and the community groups that we've engaged with on this process. And the point of issuing a press statement around this has been to look to time that to coincide with the upload of the details to the web page, and also to alert people of the scope to participate in the consultation process, the surveys that will accompany this. And so we're looking for those to be aligned. The web page material has just been pulled together, given that it's needing the details from the 35 sites to be compiled there, and the consultation tool connections made. We expect that should be taking place within a few days, so we're hopeful that that will be attended to. And when that's ready, we'll be able to announce that those details have been established and that people can participate in the consultation. And we'll put out a notice to that effect.
Okay, so it's really timing, and this is when the season's really starting now, and it's all been done to coincide with that. So what we've asked for is actually happening, but it's just the sequence of events. Councillor Kerr, are you content that within the communication with the communities is imminent, and it's just about being able to get things tidied up so that we can launch it and actually be able to do so in a political forum as well, now that PURDA's concluded?
I'm happy with that. I understand it's been difficult, convener, with the election and with the COVID, but it was agreed that this would happen before we even started. It hasn't, and it's unfortunate it hasn't, but if this is going to help get the communication out in the next short period of time, fine now.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on the rolling action log? No. If we move into our next agenda item, which is item 5, and it's a referral from the Audit Committee on the corporate risk management. And I think it's Mr. Smale, it's with yourself.
Thank you, convener, and good morning. As you note, the report is a referral on from the Audit Committee and has already been considered by that committee. Maybe just to draw out the main elements in the report that sits behind the cover report. It deals with the corporate risk dashboard, and as will be evident, there are some areas of limited assurance which will require ongoing attention. As for the corporate risk register, that remains broadly as was submitted to you back in September, so there's no significant change there. The cover report notes that as part of the consideration by the Audit Committee at the suggestion of the convener, which is readily accepted, the risk register will have added to it the exercise to bring the trust back into the council, so that change will be made. And maybe just to round off, for your information, to note that there will be a couple of risk-related reports coming before members in June. One took the Scrutiny Committee on COVID, and the other for you, the Executive, relating to climate change and sustainability. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Smale. This was at the Audit Committee, and there was a fairly robust scrutiny of it there. But I would just invite the Convener of Audit if there's any comments that he wanted to make. Nigel?
Thanks, Convener. No specific comments. As you say, there was robust discussion at the last Audit Committee of this, and I'm happy to recommend that the Executive accept this.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. On that, I'm happy to move the report.
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bouse. Is there any questions or comments that anyone would wish to make at this time? No, happy to agree. Thank you. Okay, item 6 is the Local Development Plan 2 Supplementary Guidance SGO 5 Green Infrastructure and New Development, and it's with Douglas.
Thanks, Convener. I would want to introduce Andrew McNair, who's on the call from the Planning and Environment Unit, and it's Andrew's work that's been pulled together in this supplementary guidance note that we're seeking approval of from the Executive this morning. And so, as I say, the report is an appendix that details the latest supplementary guidance note that's been produced in support of the local development plan. Members will be aware that we've been establishing this set of guidance to accompany the development plan in 2 tranches. The first group, which is a set of technical notes, which we're proceeding with under delegation, and a set of more policy-related guidance, which we're bringing to the Executive for approval. So this is in the second group, the guidance on green infrastructure and new development, and we're seeking approval of this document for submission to ministers, and if they are comfortable with the document, it would then be adopted as part of the development plan. The report has been subject of consultation taking place over the start of the year, and the report gives a narrative in relation to the outcome of that consultation. The topic of this guidance is green infrastructure, and that's a generic term that covers a range of natural, semi-natural spaces, public parks, amenity green space, wildlife sites, sports pitches, play areas, water bodies and active travel links. And the guidance seeks to demonstrate how green infrastructure can be integrated with other development that's taking place. It covers the main themes of well-being, because these the facilities and open space, etc., are in place for the well-being of the community. For well-being, water and wildlife, because they help to promote the biodiversity of the area. We highlight good practice, and there are examples throughout the document of good practice that's in place around the area, particularly the facilities at the Helix, at Forth Valley Hospital in the Larbert Woods, at the New Zetland Park regeneration work that's taken place, and at Carden Dams, the Heritage Trail, which was subject of a recent award from the Town Planning Institute. It sets out the requirements for provision of recreational open space in new development, and that's a key factor for developers in considering how they proceed with their development and knowing what the standards are that the Council will expect. It also looks to deal with issues of compensation for any loss of recreational open space where that's associated with a development, and sets out particular requirements for the management and maintenance of the green infrastructure. One of the main issues, as I say, was this point about the provision of recreational open space and development, and the three-stage process that we adopt is set out in the report to consider how that should be provided, and it has regard to a local open space audit that's taken place at the pre-application stage of a development to consider how the recreational needs of a development should be met. And then it sets out the standards by which that would be determined, and whether the provision needs to be on site, a combination of on and off site provision, or if in fact there's no requirement given that there are good standards within the vicinity of the development. Importantly, the figure 7 in the document sets out the rates per house, per flat, to calculate the developer contributions, because based on these we would seek to attract developer contributions to allow open space and green infrastructure to be enhanced to accommodate the needs of the development. These rates are based on similar documents that we have our previous open space and new development supplementary guidance, and that's been benchmarked with authorities around the country. So, as I say, intention is, if members are accepting of the paper, that we would look to put this to Scottish ministers and seek its adoption. We do give a narrative there relating to the outcomes of the consultation, contacted over 900 agencies, and we did receive a number of responses there, summarised in the appendix. No real issues arising, except for one response from a homeowner suggesting that they are concerned that the cost of private factoring of their estate, and whether the council would accept their site for maintenance. And we make the point that unless the council costs for maintenance are met in full, then we would be unable to adopt an area for maintenance. The report goes through the various implications, financial, legal, etc., and it highlights the environmental impact, which clearly this aligns very closely with, in particular with the Council's ambitions for low carbon and to meet the terms of the climate change emergency. And this will be an important document when it comes to future developments looking to help contribute towards these objectives. So, in conclusion, it's an important piece of work that moves us forward in terms of the support for green infrastructure across a range of developments in the area. It helps to advance the work taking place on the development plan. We do need to get, if the executive is minded to approve, we need to get the approval of Scottish ministers prior to becoming formally adopted as part of the development plan, and we're seeking that support today. So I'm happy to take any questions, and similarly would invite Andrew to step in if there's detailed questions members would like to consider.
Thank you, Douglas. I'll go to Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Convener. Happy to propose acceptance of this particular report. And it's a report that sees, and I think puts in perspective, the whole local plan agenda. It supplies a number of the issues, a number of the clarifications as well of what the local plan actually is, stretched round edges of that particular document. It's I'd like to congratulate the officers that are responsible for putting this together, because whenever we spoke to them last, it was difficult to put into words just exactly what was required to make Falkirk greener, and you know, they succeeded in interpreting the members' wishes with their own insights and objectives. So happy to move this, Convener, and you know, happy to take any questions that may arise.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Gardner.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to thank David for running through that as well, and also Andrew and Douglas for Andrew for putting the report together and probably for answering some of the questions coming up, I imagine. This report and the supplementary guidance, green infrastructure and new development is, I'm sure, welcomed by all elected members here. This is echoed in Appendix 1 by Scottish Water, Nature Scotland, Historic Environment Scotland and Path for All, key agencies who replied to the consultation. The small number of responses out of the 900 notified illustrates that this report does tick the vast majority of the boxes and has their approval. You tend to find these sort of things, if they have something sort of like pick out or a wee bit negative, they will come forward. So I think that's an illustration that they haven't done that on this occasion. If I may, I just highlight the outstanding work of our officers and Falkirk Council do already surrounding this subject. And to quote Pass for All, a national charity who promote walking and look to make Scotland a happier, healthier place to live, Falkirk Council can build on the already exemplar approach to green infrastructure. And I think that tells you where we are just now, and it is backed up what the officers are doing and what Falkirk Council is doing going ahead. Workshops held back in 2019 had representation from across the council, the development industry and key agencies. This well-received approach was beneficial, helping achieve buy-in and input into the structure and the content of the guidance. Green infrastructure is essential to many within our communities. Public parks, green spaces, woodlands, water bodies, wildlife sites, woodland areas and active travel, some of the aspects which improve people's health and well-being while increasing recreational opportunities. It also helps address the climate change through sequestration and flood prevention, the surface water storage creating natural habitat for wildlife and helps mitigate against biodiversity loss, as Douglas alluded to earlier on as well. SGO5 will help applicants incorporate well-designed green infrastructure into new developments and achieve wider sustainability in the process. Some of our current projects were used to highlight good practice, including the Helix, Larbert Woods, Zetland Park and Carn Dam Heritage Trails. In short, the approval of this report today will support LDP2 objectives, supporting a low-carbon circular economy, building a resilience to climate change, extending and improving our green network, improving our active travel, and protecting and enhancing the area's natural environment and resources. It's crucial that we agree this report today, enabling our officers to take this forward to the Scottish Government for approval. I'm happy to second the report, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. I thought Paul was going to go on for a wee bit longer, so apologies for that. Just to say, a lot of obviously Paul's already covered the detail of it, and I don't think there's anything in here that anybody could disagree with. Happy to support, as has already been said. Andrew, obviously, but I think Richard and Mandy and that whole team need to be acknowledged for the work that's been done as far as the environmental improvements that we're doing across the whole district. I think it shows that we do indeed need to be, excuse the pun, walking the walk rather than just talking the talk. And obviously this work continues on from what has been done in the past. A few years ago, I was delighted to accept, I can't remember what the award was, I'm sure Douglas will remind me, Douglas Mackay, when he was the minister, there was a big award ceremony in Glasgow, and Falkirk picked up an award for the work that's been done for the green corridors that we're putting in. The only thing I would like to say is, well, sorry, it's a quick question first. One of the pages in the report on water restoring and the water environment, and the deculverting, I didn't even know it was a word. As we know, culverts do contribute quite often to the flood risk when they get blocked. I just wondered if there was any particular areas across Falkirk where that was actually being actively looked at. I don't know if that would be Andrew or Douglas.
Douglas will decide whether it's hard or an easy one. He might deflect to Andrew.
Yeah, Andrew probably knows the detail. I would expect deculverting would be to remove culverts and create swales and suds, etc., that allow for freer movement of water. And I'm expecting that the likes of the Grangemouth Flood Prevention Scheme, as part of that, we would be looking at the prospect that that might contribute. But we'd probably look to Andrew to fill in any details if there's particular locations we've been looking at for that technique.
Okay.
Yeah, hi there.
Hi,
My
Andrew.
planning colleagues recently consulted on a surface water strategy for the whole council area, and within that, I think they've pinpointed some sites where it is suggested that an action could be to look at deculverting, introducing more natural flows to the water. Deco has many benefits for the environment. It's also been used as a tool for placemaking as well. I don't have anything else to add, but thanks. Thanks for the compliments from all the councillors that have spoken so far. It was a team effort from my colleagues.
Can I? Sorry, Joan, I was just going to say, is that likely to come forward to even to local members about any proposals in the future about deculverting, if that's been identified?
The strategy was just out for consultation. I'm not sure if there's going to be a future report on the final version of it, but I could check with my flooding colleagues and get back to you with an answer on that. Is that okay?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. Sorry, Joan.
Thanks.
No, it's fine. It's just because one of the reasons I was asking is because we do have a lot of issues within my area, Airth and Latham, particularly for a lot of localised flooding, and I just wondered if there was work being done specifically in those areas. And just one final comment, obviously this is part of our supplementary guide for our local development plan, and I'm sure everybody's aware that the Scottish Government planning policies as part of the next National Planning Framework, NPF4, will be getting worked on and hopefully will be out next year. And obviously, as everybody is now working towards a more greener environment and our net zero by 2045 in Scotland. I get mixed up, everybody's got all these different targets. And I think that we should, as I said, be leading the way and showing that we're trying to reduce car use and increase our reduce our carbon footprints. Anyway, that was all. It was just a few general comments, and it was a really, really good report. Albeit that I haven't through it all. I'm sure other members have been busy as I have over the past week, but at some point I'll certainly plough through the rest of it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. Given the importance that green space has in terms of well-being in the current pandemic, this report demonstrates that in Falkirk we're well served in many areas. The one question I would like to ask is a purely practical one, and I know this is a planning document in the main, but one of the complaints we regularly receive is about unloved bits of open space or neglected bits of open space, and will the guidance in here address these gaps that we currently have and which causes complaints with residents? Thank you.
Okay, Douglas.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge for this is that, clearly there's often orphan land and, uncertainty over ownerships and, sites that where owners, aren't attending to the maintenance requirements that they have. This document gives guidance as to any treatment that would take place on a site, but it doesn't have the tools to intervene, to acquire, to conduct any, proactive repairs to damage or upgrade to the amenity of a site. That relies on other tools, and obviously recently at the budget there was some additional funds found for environmental enforcement and upgrade works, where that's possible to do. It does require consent of owners and so on, and that can be where the complexity arises. So really, it's not something that this document is intended to address, other than that if someone is minded to upgrade a site that is an eyesore, then they could adopt the principles that are suggested here.
Surely it's the planning process that has caused these gaps in the past, and there ought to be ways in which we can sort of avoid that in the future.
Certainly would do it in terms of adopting the principles, you know, and the guidance that is suggested that would avoid the creation of that kind of site in future. That's certainly the intention of the document and of the policies we apply more generally through the plan. The sites you mentioned are those that, you know, can arise through, you know, consequence of development over time, and they become isolated, they become run down and neglected by owners. You know, there's been a very recent and quite thorny example of this over in Bonnybridge that we've had to deal with recently. And it is highly complex to get to the bottom of it, to resolve who owns the site, to resolve all the different uses that may occupy it, and whether enforcement powers need to be applied, and then to get to work on cleanup. These are very difficult and, you know, quite complex arrangements, and it has taken officers time and, you know, on several occasions to get to the bottom of it and resolve. The guidance is there to help with that, but getting to the fundamentals of some of these sites does require, you know, considerably more tools to be applied.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Convener. In 4.1, it describes all the items that are to be included in green infrastructure, but doesn't mention gardens or private gardens, whereas in the guidance itself, it does include private gardens. I'm assuming private gardens includes those which are really public gardens, those of council tenants. Getting quite alarmed now by the loss of green space within estates, whether they be private or public. You go along roads now and there are little, well, I wouldn't say none, but very few front gardens now. There are front car parking spaces. And in private estates, that is starting to develop also. How do we can certainly implement the green infrastructure when the planning application comes in the future, but can we stop further development of this type once the estate is built? In other words, if a number of gardens disappear and they're replaced by car parking, can we be able to stop this in the future?
Douglas.
I think the main control we've got over that is for the formation of access driveways, where, you know, a road service needs to give consent for any amendments to drop the curbs to allow driveways to be provided, and that maybe is a point we can pick up to encourage consultation between planning and roads as to whether that consent is appropriate if there is a concern about the reduction in green space in a development as a consequence. So I think the point's well made, Councillor, and it's certainly something we can take back. It's not something that's dealt with specifically in this guidance. The guidance is more generic about how these areas are designed for new developments to start with, but it probably is a point that we should have regard to in the future when it comes to that kind of request. I know we have had some requests for the formation of extra parking areas and so on. in some developments to deal with some of the congestion, but clearly that does lead to an erosion of the green infrastructure, and it plainly does give some concern. Andrew, I don't know if you want to add to that in terms of any feedback from the consultation that was received.
Well, we had no feedback on that particular point, Councillor, but what I can say is the formation of driveways is permitted development, provided the surface is porous material. If it's, say, you're putting in a concrete or tar, you all have to apply for planning permission for the council. I suppose that through the application process that we could have some control, but I don't think we'd have particular control over the loss of the space. It's quite a complicated area. It's not something that we could easily fix through planning. Yeah. The
Yes,
best.
I do appreciate it's complicated, but in addition to what's happening in the front garden, the rear garden can be getting covered over by decking as well. So we're losing green space all the time.
Yeah, and that has an impact on flooding as well. If we increase permeable areas, that adds pressure to our waters, our drainage systems. But it's a difficult area. It's maybe something that the Scottish Government are looking at through the National Planning Framework 4, which is coming out next year. They might have policies that could address the issues that you've raised in some way, Councillor.
Convener, it's certainly something we'd be happy to take away and examine further and report back to members if it suggests that there's further steps should be taken.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
I think that would be helpful, Douglas. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Just on, no, I wasn't going to mention this, but just on the point that Councillor Reid made there, we've just, as a council, took all the greens away and Grangewood and Lorison and put chips down. So, as a council, we've no help with that. And the reason we've done it is so the maintenance is less. But that's not my point. But I just wanted to say that as a council, we have taken the green areas away and the areas that I've already mentioned. The question I was wanting to ask, I don't know if for Andrew, when a new development is built and a play provision has been sought, who decides what play provision goes in that area? Or what kind of play provision goes in that area?
I can come in on that. Yeah, our staff in the planning environment team, it's other staff within Andrew's team who engage with developers on that and can give recommendations on the appropriate equipment, the standards that should be supplied to. Obviously, we maintain our own play areas and have got responsibility for the standard and maintenance of these facilities, but we also give advice to developers where necessary for them to make sure that there's compliance in the development.
Thanks, Douglas. I just, because I've had a lot of complaints recently regarding play equipment, but when the play equipment goes in, if you're between 4 and 8 year old, it's fine. But after 8 up to 14, there's no allot for these kids. If we could get a play provision like what's at Calendar Park for all our areas, they'll be happy. But I understand that's very difficult because there's a lot of play provision there. But myself, I'm going to contact Gordon and Councillor McCluckie. I'm going to see if we can, once we get the report for the Levelling Up Fund, the three as a group, I want the three to go to Martin Day and see if we can improve our area play provision. So thanks for that, Douglas. I just want to know who was responsible for that.
Yeah, I would say our powers are limited. You know, it's down to giving guidance to developers. It's their responsibility to put that in place. Obviously, they get consent for their planning consent for their scheme when at the outset. But there are, you know, standards that we expect in play provision that we would guide developers towards.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew, for you and your team for another report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Nimmo.
Just quickly, Convener, I'm saying this a bit tongue-in-cheek, and it's not been mentioned so far, but how does AstroTurf fit into the green infrastructure? Council tenants, do they need permission to put AstroTurf down and do away with real grass? I'm just curious, to be honest. It's not been mentioned previously.
That's an interesting question. I don't know whether that's Douglas or Kenny or both.
I don't believe we're taking applications for provision of AstroTurf, but where it's associated with a drive at the point Andrew made earlier, and where, you know, clearly if it's not porous, then that would give a concern. So I don't know, Andrew, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I do sympathise with the Astro surfacing in front gardens. Seen it myself. There isn't very little by way of planning control. I think the situations where a whole owner would have to require for planning permission if it's in a conservation area or within the curtilage of a listed building. And as Douglas said, if it's for a driveway and it's impermeable sublayer, planning system doesn't really have much control over AstroTurf surfacing, I'm afraid.
But we do have control over council tenants and what they do. Would we be intending to stop tenants from putting AstroTurf down in council properties?
Okay, Kenny.
Thanks, Convener. It's not something that we do at the present time to take away AstroTurf. They would need to make us aware that that's what they would want to do as part of the missives, but we have no guidance to stop them. And certainly under the housing revenue account, it's very much where possible tenants' choice going forward, and that might be to help their maintenance. But it's certainly something that we've been working very closely, certainly in the last 6 months with Douglas' team, with Marie Claire as well, going forward to see what we can do to help support the green agenda.
Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Garner, you wanted to come back.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. And it's just in relation to what Councillor Kerr said, and it's been muted here quite a few times now on various meetings in relation to the removal of the hedges and the front lawns. And I don't want to get into the political side of things. It happened before my tenure as environment spokesperson. I went through, and I think it was prior to this administration as well. But I do think, I'm not criticising that because that was at the time, I do think there's a positive change within the council's attitude now in relation to things like this, in relation to the environment, in relation to biodiversity. And I'm not sure how that policy would have been received, or had been received as welcoming as it was at first, because I do believe it went through the council with full approval. So yeah, there's a good positive change in attitude, and it's good to hear everybody coming in this one. And I know how much the cross-party working group has progressed and moved on with things like this, and it's great to hear that it's at the forefront of officers and elected members' minds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. I think we also see a very much a golden thread from our corporate priorities right the way through to actually getting out to that front line of delivery. And as Councillor Coombs says, that it's not just about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk. And with policies like this, it should actually be able to be demonstratively seen by our communities. As there's no other members, I'm going to go to Councillor Alexander to see if he wants to wind up.
Just a few words. I think, Convener, we have to accept that there will be a proportion of our properties that is, on safety grounds, it's necessary to park off street on the front garden area. The same principle would go with the AstroTurf. We cut the numbers on who received garden aid a number of years ago. And the consequence of that is that many of these elderly people who otherwise would have qualified for garden aid no longer qualify. Some of them in the late 80s, early 90s. And so we've got to accept that they will need a home maintenance garden if they're not qualified for garden aid. So it's not a wholly acceptable position that the council's in, but we do have flexibility within the schemes, and we do have flexibility within this report. As I hope that we'll take advantage of, do so in a way that is convenient, or more than convenient, for many of the people who, for whatever reason, have chosen the particular path. So quite happy with that, convener, and look forward to seeing that change, because there's what I recall for play areas within the new areas that I represent is that 10 minutes after the play equipment is in, there's a request by residents to have it removed on the grounds of antisocial behaviour, or even noise nuisance, and the inability of children to actually get access to the play area because of damage caused by older youth or noise created for residents. And that's a problem for us. And thanks very much, convener, for allowing me to come back and make these points. And I'm grateful for the comments that have been made throughout by this committee, and thank you for your positive contribution.
Thank you. Are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to item 7, and it's COVID-19 supporting people funding report. And Kenny, that's with you.
Thanks, convener. Yep, I'll go over the report, and I've got Sally Buchanan, the Fair Falkirk Senior Coordinator. As you said earlier, Sally will answer the difficult questions at the end. So, very quickly, the purpose of this report is laid out in section 1, and the report is laid out basically in 2 parts. First part is about information on the support that has been provided so far, and the second part proposed use of the further funding to continue support. The report for members does not include business grants nor funding provided against specific criteria, such as self-isolation support grants. Section 2 lays out the recommendations, and I'll come back to them at the end. Section 3 of the report provides information on the support for people, especially our partnership approach. This would not have been possible without local community groups and the support of the Health and Social Care Partnership, NHS, CVS Falkirk, as well as a host of other council services, including housing communities, finance, governance and children's services. Also within section 3 of the report, there's a case study from RVS to give an example, demonstrate the scale of the response for members. Table 1 provides information on the funding received, including nearly 1 million of funding that we were notified of in March 2021. Section 4 of the report provides information on the use of the fund to date and the impact it has had. Also within section 4, table 2 in this section shows how we allocated the funding and the spend to end of March. We've also included estimated spends to mid-May to allow us to reallocate underused funding to other areas. And as you will see from table 2, the funding has supported a range of activities, recognising different people have different needs, focused on supporting people most in need and responding to feedback from our communities what was needed. Section 5 sets out our proposal for how funding will be used to support people during 21-22, with the allocation against each element shown in table 3. And as before, we propose a wide range of support, making sure that we are supporting different requirements. Within there's a list of proposals, and some of these are to continue provision for people entitled to free school meals during summer holidays,
food support via community groups to reach into communities, fuel support to particular groups at risk of fuel poverty, and continue with the self-isolation. Mention a few there. Also, I think it's important that within there that we continue to support volunteers through the additional expenses. Section 6 their support provides proposals based on the feedback from our communities and what is needed, particularly via our community coordination group that's held every Thursday from all the partners that were listed above. Section 7 outlines our risks. I think within this section, a lot of the risks are unknown. I mean, the unknowns are based on demand. It's hard to predict, particularly with the unknown future of the pandemic. What resources we'll be able to allocate depending on need. A full APIA has not been completed for this, however, the proposals have been designed to address inequalities, in particular to support people living on a low income who are at risk of poverty. It's well understood that COVID has made things worse for people in poverty, as well as pushing more people into poverty. The report sets out a range of support that will put in place further COVID funding over 21-22, as well as providing an update on the support provided over the last year. If we could take convener members back to section 2 of the recommendations, we could draw attention to the section 2.11, approval of further use of the funding to support activities detailed in section 5.2. It's a typo there, and apologies, convener, it should be 5.1, which is the table that shows the spending. Regardless of how many times I've read the report, I missed that. In 2.12, again, provide direct payments in lieu of the free school meals, which is in section 5.2. Happy to take any questions, convener.
Thank you, Kenny. And thanks for bringing forward this report. I think it's helpful to be able to reflect on where we've been and therefore where we are and what we need to do going forward. I've tried to make the best use of the funding that's come to us that's targeted to ensure that we affect those that are in greatest need, and continue to use our own discretionary funds to support that work. It is difficult to hear that those that were already in poverty or on that poverty line, and lives have been made worse as a result of the pandemic. And I just hope that we have been able to help support them through the last year, 18 months, and we can now begin to do work with them to actually try and lift them out of that poverty levels and support them to be able to become more sustainable. And I think that our communities are doing an awful lot to support a lot of that work. A huge amount of effort has gone in through our volunteers. But we do have the other cohort that we're managing and sustaining that have dropped into poverty. And as we go forward over the next year, I suspect that there'll be others will fall down into that level and will continue to need support. Therefore, it's going to be important that we are able to have the resources to be able to keep supporting people going forward, because we've still got a long way to go and to actually come out of the impacts of this pandemic. And as a council, we have allocated significant resource as well as using the additional funds that have come to us. So I just want to say thanks to officers for pulling this together and their continuing work to target those most in greatest need, ensuring that those that are digitally excluded have access to the internet to be able to apply for benefits, help employment, learning, training, whatever that may be required. Also around the addressing the food poverty and trying to sustain our community groups to be able to work within our communities, and obviously the free school meals and be able to sustain that out with the term time is something that has become quite critical, because one way of being able to ensure that children are sustained is to make sure that they actually have, they don't have to go hungry, and none of us would want that to happen, and there's a lot of work going on there. I'm happy to move the report as it is and to take any questions, and I'm sure members will have questions and perhaps some comments in relation to their own experiences within the community. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. I'll start off by saying I'm happy to second this report. The last year and a bit, it seemed a lot longer, has been terrible for all our communities, and has been identified by Kenny and yourself. You're quite right. It's the poorest in society that have probably suffered mostly from this. As far as I'm aware, Falkirk have been quite at the forefront of this in council terms, and the work that was done from the very start is a credit to Kenny and his team, but also a number of other officers at Falkirk Council. I know the report from RVS, or the case study from RVS. There's probably, I think, just about every councillor on here, and possibly just about every officer could probably tell us, do a case study on a community group in their own area, for amazing work that's been done. I'll just touch on a certain little football club, Stennismuir, who yesterday passed 10,000 meals, which they're still producing because this hasn't finished yet, and that's what I very much welcome. The monies that are to be spent going forward, particularly the 250,000 to support the food supply, which will be needed for a while. We don't know what's going to happen. I hope we don't see any more lockdowns. I hope we don't see any more rises in COVID, and we therefore can start to think about getting over this. It has cost too many lives. It's been absolutely awful. I've got to add that one of the big things I think is the lessons we've learned as we went along. I like the way the digital stuff. If you look at pages 111, 112, it lists all the organisations who are speaking to the local people. Some of them are KLSB is a food bank, but because they're speaking to the community, they've learnt that people required, and they've found people who are digitally isolated. It's one of the best things that we're doing here, because the isolation thing is a thing that really hurts when you see people are isolated and they don't know how to contact. This is going to allow people to do these things. As we move forward, I just hope we see an end to where we are today. I welcome the monies that's going in here, and as I said at the start, I'm more than happy to second this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Anyone else, any other comments or questions? Okay, I've got Councillor Caird and Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. As you've already stated, and Councillor Bowes already stated, without these volunteer groups and the monies and the help that Falkirk Council have contributed, a lot of people would have been more destitute than they are. There is people out there who are living right on the breadline. Some of them living below it, and any wee bit of help that we can give is really appreciated. And one of the things for Councillor Hughes and myself's area is the help that Ken and his team gave to the people with the non-gas areas for the electricity, to help pay the electricity bills, which was a lifeline for some of these families. and really appreciated. So, as everybody's saying, it's not going to get any easier going forward this year and probably into next year. So, any help that's provided is really appreciated by the families. And if we didn't have the volunteers in every area, we'd be goosed. So, a big shout out to them and thank everybody for the work that they've done and the work that's haven't got to be done in the future. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks very much, Convener. Can I also thank officers for all the work that's been put in, not just in this report, but in the background as well. We're doing a good job in supporting vulnerable families and individuals out there in Falkirk. But the bottom line is we can always do more. There's always something else that we can do to help. In relation to page 103 and the table that's there, I'm a bit disappointed that we don't have a total for the number of inquiries that we've received. I raised this at a pre-meet as well. I'm a bit conscious that because we don't have this figure, there could be individuals or families slipping through the net and not getting the support that they deserve. I'm not sure if it's maybe something that we need to contemplate for the future to collate these figures, but I don't think they're available. Maybe officers could comment on that.
Kenny, are you able to?
I'm happy to that. The figures are available. We do respond to figures to Scottish Government, and one of the benefits of the calls coming through support for people is that we have a checklist to go through, so we actually don't capture not just about their need at that present time, it's we capture subsequent needs to make sure that they could be requiring additional support, make sure that they get the right benefits, and also other dependencies that they get the right support as well. So it's a very much a real good multi-agency approach, and I do believe that's why this has been a success, as much as I say success could be in a difficult position. But certainly we do have figures. They're not in the report, but we can certainly provide figures off table to members as a follow-up note. Convener, happy to do that.
I'm happy with that, Convener. Look forward to the information.
Yeah, I think there's been a huge amount of contacts being made to the council through the Support for People helpline, and I think that has proved it was the right thing to do at the time, and many other councils then took that model that we developed, and that was very much seen as good practice. And absolutely astounded by the positive comments that have been made as a result of the contacts and the experience that they've had through that, and a lot of it was around signposting, whether it was to RBS or whether it was to the community groups, but what is more remarkable is that we were able to deal with the capacity, that our communities were really resilient and be able to be responsive and be able to be sustained, and are still doing that today, which is absolutely fantastic. So any other questions or comments? No, I'll please take out our positive comments back to all of the team in relation to that, and we look forward to seeing further updates on that, and indeed if there's gaps, then we want to know very quickly if there's gaps, so that we can start to look to adjust what we're doing in order to be able to fulfil that. I'll be happy to agree with the report.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We now move into private session for the final item.